Dr. Pamela Dalton, we are so glad to have you join us again today for Fragrance Day. This is our reunion. We were together last March 21st, and the world has progressed, and I know you have much to share with us. But before we do that, would you please share the history of the Monell Center and your role as an olfactory research scientist? And if you just have an overall, since last spring, the findings of COVID's effect on the sense of smell, and then we'll get into some very specific questions. Pam.
Absolutely. And Linda, it's a pleasure to be back here with you again, another one-year reunion on Fragrance Day. Monell is a unique institution. It is the only research center, basic research nonprofit in the world that is devoted to the study of smell and taste and chemical sensation. We are 54 years old. We have about 100 people working to understand the mechanisms and the function of these sensory systems that are so crucial to everyday life and health. And so we're privileged to be working in this area. And I have been at Monell for almost 30 years, came as a postdoctoral fellow, and found the research questions so fascinating that I couldn't leave. And so I've been there ever since, studying how people do the process of smelling, how smells affect them, how it alters their choices in food and the behavior and the environments that they live in, and the whole interaction between our ability to smell and how that makes us feel and react in everyday life.
Wow. So since you mentioned your history, I will mention I've been in the fragrance industry for the same amount of time you've been working at Monell, I would say. And one just minor update, but you know this update because it's big in the industry and for the community. During this most difficult, challenging pandemic, which has had so many phases, people have really, I think, revalued and increased the value of the sense of smell. And it is related, of course, to the sense of taste. So for that reason, we're going to get right into it. But people have been using fragrance for the last 2 years more than ever as a personal accessory, as a manner of transportive escape to other places in time, and for self-care at home. So everyone tuned is really interested to hear what you're going to say. So my first question is, what is long COVID, and how is the loss of smell involved with that?
So long COVID is a series of symptoms or problems that exist after the virus has abated. It's also called post-acute sequela of COVID, PASC. You may see that term as well. Basically, it's a constellation of symptoms, breathlessness, respiratory problems, fatigue, cognitive difficulties, such as difficulties remembering, difficulties making decisions, difficulties just thinking the normal way we do. It's been referred to as brain fog. But as part of this, for a certain percentage of people who lost their smell acutely with COVID, they have failed to recover their ability to smell. And so persistent loss of smell is part of long COVID for many people.
Wow. If that is the case, the next question is, what can a person do to get their sense of smell back?
Certainly, if they have persistent loss of smell, it makes sense for them to consult a physician, predominantly an ENT physician, someone who's skilled in being able to look into the nasal passages and ensure that there's no swelling or congestion that would limit their ability to smell. Most of the time with long COVID loss of smell, that is not the case. It has to do more with the cells that are responsible for letting our olfactory receptors actually operate and send smell signals to our brain. And for that reason, there aren't many treatments that we know of at this point in time. One thing that seems to help some people, and I will say not by any means all people, is something called smell training. And this has been long known to be effective for post-viral smell loss, even pre-COVID times, where what you do is you select 4 or 5 different odorants. They can be things that you purchase, essential oils. They can be things that you find in your kitchen, smells of spices, or you can go into your bathroom and pull out lotions and shampoos and things that have an odor that you remember what the odor smelled like. And twice a day, you take about 5 minutes in the morning and 5 in the evening, and you intentionally smell them. And you think about what the memory of that smell was like, even if you're not getting any scent at all. This is something that is seemed to be able to sort of restart the process of smelling for some people. Now, we don't have a lot of data on this and its success rate, but it is something that people can certainly try. It's very cost effective. It doesn't have any risks like steroid therapy will. So it's something that is being recommended. And there are a lot of trials going on right now to actually show how efficacious it can be.
Wow, that's very helpful because there's a lot of talk about that, particularly in our fragrance community. My next question is, could smell loss happen over and over again if someone is reinfected?
Unfortunately, smell loss could happen over again. I personally know of a number of people who had smell loss with the very first bout of COVID, the variant we call alpha or perhaps beta because it wasn't determined. And then when Delta came around, they were reinfected. And this is despite being vaccinated and even boosted at that point in time, and did lose their sense of smell, but they recovered both times. Now, not everyone is that lucky. And so we do not really know how repeated insult to the olfactory system may impair it and essentially cause the long COVID, the persistent loss of smell. We are learning so much, Linda, and this is an unparalleled, it's a horrible thing, but it is an unparalleled opportunity for us to not only value how important our sense of smell is, but also to learn as much as we can about how it works and what can disrupt it.
Well, that's actually a good segue because I know Monell is doing so much. So could you explain to us, why is Monell developing what I've heard is a sentinel?
Yes. So because we were intrigued, and this is going back 2 years now into March of 2020, that one of the earliest signs of COVID infection was a sudden loss of smell and taste. That we thought perhaps being able to screen for this symptom was more predictive of COVID infection than a fever, for example, because sudden loss of smell and taste doesn't happen with the flu or other viral infections, and it was specific to COVID. So our idea was to develop a quick way for people to be safely screened, that they could go back into an office or a workplace. And we had a lot of questions from many different sectors of the world. People who worked in nursing homes, for example, where bringing in a COVID infection to a vulnerable population would be deadly, right? So what we decided to do, our Sentinel test is a unique novel smell test. It measures 4 different aspects of our ability to smell and can be done in less than 2 minutes. So most smell tests are of the scratch and sniff variety, where you're asked to simply scratch a patch, sniff it, and decide what you're smelling from a list of 4 alternatives. What we have done is we've embodied 3 or 4 different types of metrics in one test. The card has 3 patches, only one of which contains the odor. And so the first question is, we're using lift and sniff technology, which is the odorant is embedded in a glue patch, and you lift the cover of it, and you don't have to scratch it because that leads to variation in the intensity of the odor. You lift the cover and you decide, first of all, which patch contains the odor. Your second question is, how strong is it? And you use this on either a smartphone or a tablet, or you can do it on your laptop computer, and you slide a slider to say how strong the odor is. The third question is, what does it smell like? And you're given 4 pictures with labels. And the final question is, how pleasant is it? Because some people who have smell loss from COVID, as they begin to recover, have a distortion that we call parosmia. And parosmia usually makes things that used to smell good smell very bad. And so getting an indication of the pleasantness of an odor can also diagnose this condition called parosmia. It's all on a single card. It can be mailed to someone. It's inexpensive. It takes less than 2 minutes to complete. And we were funded by the National Institutes of Health to develop this as a screening mechanism for COVID. But we see it having implications well beyond that for understanding the ability of people to smell more generally. So we're all about universal smell testing, the same way we get our eyes and our vision tested, we get our hearing tested. We believe everybody should have a smell test multiple times during their life.
That is a wow. You flashed us back, because when COVID just started getting out there across the world, everyone was getting their temperature checked before they walked in somewhere. And it's come a long way. So how would I get this Sentinel test? And do I take it myself? And if I did, what would I myself learn from it? So number one, how do I get it? Or how does anyone get it?
At this point, it's still a research tool. And we have worked with and partnered with a company that will be commercializing it. And so soon we hope it will be available for sale. But right now it's a research tool. And if you would like it, you can contact the Monell Center and we can provide that to you for purposes of either demonstration or participation in one of our research studies. And there are a number of studies going on that you could be part of. So that's where we are presently, but in the future, and we hope the near future, it will be commercially available. What can it tell you? Well, it can tell you a lot about how well you can smell relative to the rest of the population. And importantly, if you take it over time, even once a year, changes in our ability to smell can tell us so much about our underlying health conditions. We know, for example, that many neurodegenerative diseases start with an inability to smell years before there is cognitive decline, or in, let's say, Parkinson's, before there are motor symptoms. And so understanding this year to year, even if you took it once a year, seeing a change in that over time would tell you that there's a reason you may need to be screened for another health condition underlying that. But it's good to know self-report and self-awareness about smell is not that great, particularly if it declines slowly. And so having an ability to test yourself against the same metric over and over again can tell you whether you need to install a methane detector in your home if you have natural gas service, because you might not be able to pick up on a gas leak. We have seen numerous cases in the news reports of one person in a family who did not lose smell due to COVID being able to alert the entire family that there was a fire. So these are things we should be aware of, and we're not, because we don't regularly get our sense of smell tested.
Pam, that is actually so insightful. It sounds funny, but the simplest things, everyone goes for their annual checkup.
Yes.
And everyone knows the routine. And I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I'm probably speaking on behalf of the community. That is something we would really like to be watching. So as always, we join hands and noses with the Monell Center. And what I'm going to do, Pam, since today is Monday, March 21st, we will include a click through and a link in our noteworthy newsletter, which comes out on Friday, and let anyone, it's about 10,000 people at this point, or maybe after Fragrance Day, it'll double, but we will make sure that people have a quick way to find how they can be part of this testing and data that you're gathering. Because I think for the fragrance community, knowing where you are in terms of your sense of smell and how it changes over time will be really important to us. So you have accomplished a lot in the last year. We cannot thank you enough, Pam, for joining us. Everything that you have shared is really, really valuable to us. And we're going to keep this relationship going. It is not just but once a year, but throughout the year in Noteworthy and occasionally in Accords. I'm going to ask more questions if you don't mind helping us out there.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to always interact and speak with you, Linda, and sharing this kind of information is part of Monell's mission.
Thank you so much. Have a great Fragrance Day.
You as well.
Bye.